I used to work at a small courier dispatch office in a quiet Midwestern town. We weren't exactly a bustling hub, 4 employees, one radio, and coffee that tasted like burned plastic. Most people came and went. But not Travis. Travis was odd, not in a socially awkward kind of way, more like uncomfortably still. He moved slowly, spoke softly, always wore beige, and his eyes never blinked when they should. I remember the first time I noticed something was off. We had a bulletin board near the kitchenette where people pinned coupons, flyers, or personal ads. One day, Travis pinned up a newspaper clipping, an article about a missing teenage girl, then another a few days later. Then another. After 2 weeks, the board looked like a crime blog. Every single article was about unsolved murders or disappearances. All local. I asked him once, half joking, "True crime fan?" He looked at me, no smile, and said, "You can learn a lot from the ones who never got caught." Then he walked away. I laughed nervously. Thought he was just a weirdo. But something about the way he said it stuck. What made it creepier was how specific his clippings were. He didn't collect news from national headlines or famous cases. Just local tragedies, usually obscure ones that never made it beyond our regional papers. Women, always women. And always young. I brought it up to my manager, who shrugged. "It's just Travis," she said. "He's harmless. Just into morbid stuff." But harmless people don't mark up newspaper clippings with red pen. That's what I noticed next. Some mornings, the clippings had little notes scribbled on them. Circled dates, handwritten theories, crossed out lines. As if he was trying to solve the crimes himself. Or relive them. Once I came in early and saw him staring at the board, lips moving silently. He was mouthing something. I think it was a name. But when he noticed me, he froze and quietly went back to his desk. A few months later, I changed shifts and didn't see him as much. Then one day, he just stopped showing up. No notice. No call. The company called his emergency contact. His mother, and she said she hadn't seen him in over a week. That same day, I noticed all the clippings were gone from the board. Every last one. 2 weeks passed. Then the news broke. A neighbor of Travis had called the police after smelling something rancid from his garage. What they found made national. Headlines. In the garage freezer were photographs. Dozens. Some printed, some Polaroid, some old, grainy, black and white. They were of women, most of whom were later identified as the same ones in the articles, but others, unidentified. Some photos were disturbing: duct tape, ropes, unconscious faces. One had a timestamp that matched the exact date of a disappearance: 5 years prior. There were more tools, zip ties, locks, soil samples in jars, and a notebook filled cover to cover with names, addresses, and what looked like experiments.
The
worst part, a manila folder was found, labeled next. Inside, my name, my photo, my schedule, and a copy of an article I didn't know existed about a minor car accident I'd had 3 years ago. That was published in a local column. He had circled the word fragile. I vomited in the police station when they showed me. Travis was found a few days later in an abandoned barn outside the county. Dead. Suicide. They found another notebook near his body, mostly blank. Except for one line, written in thick, jagged pen. "They only matter when they disappear." Sometimes I still walk by that old dispatch office. It's closed now. Shut down months after everything came out. But I always stop, just for a second. And I remember how close I was to something that had been watching me, studying me, planning for me. All those stories I thought were unrelated. They weren't stories to him. They were trophies, and I was almost his final one. I grew up in a small, slow-moving town where everyone knew everyone, or thought they did. Our street was quiet, lined with neatly trimmed lawns and identical mailboxes. The kind of place where neighbors wave at each other and borrow sugar. Without asking. Except for Mr. Calhoun, he lived 2 doors down. Retired, mid-60s, gray hair always slicked back, flannel shirts even in summer.
He was polite enough, always said, "Good morning," always raked his leaves. But there was something in his eyes that felt
detached, like he was always somewhere else in his mind. We kids called him the gift man. Because at night,
He would bury things. We didn't realize it at first.
But one summer, when I was around 13, my friend Jesse and I were walking home from a late movie and saw him in his backyard, under a dim floodlight, kneeling in the dirt with a small spade. He was burying a shoebox. We crouched behind his fence and watched. He didn't look around, didn't seem rushed. Just calmly dug a hole, placed the box in it, and covered it up. The next morning we snuck back. Jesse brought a cheap metal detector his uncle had given him. It didn't beep, but the fresh dirt made the spot obvious. We dug it up. Inside the box was a small porcelain doll, its eyes scratched out, and a note for Emily. We didn't know any Emily on our street. A week later, we saw him again. This time with a larger box wrapped in fabric. Same calm ritual. Dig, bury, smooth the ground. Like he was tucking something in for bed. Over the months, we found 4 more boxes. A child's shoe. A rusted spoon with initials carved into the handle. A plastic hair clip. And another note. She didn't cry this time. We stopped digging. After that, told ourselves it was just weird, not dangerous. Just an old man with ... quirks, maybe memories. Maybe grief. Years passed. I moved out, went to college, forgot most of it until last year. News broke that a local girl, 14 years old, had gone missing on her way home from school. The town was rattled. This kind of thing didn't happen here. Search parties, posters, vigils. No trace. Then a week later, someone reported a strange odor coming from Mr. Calhoun's yard. Police dug. They didn't stop at one spot. 7 shallow graves. 7 bodies. All girls, some missing for months, others for years. And with each body, they found objects, hair clips, dolls, trinkets, things we had seen or handled years ago. Mr. Calhoun was arrested without a fight. He didn't speak, just stared at the ground. In his basement, they found a journal, methodical, obsessive. It listed names, ages, locations. Some had photos attached, others had drawings. One entry simply said, "Some gifts must stay underground. That's where they're safest." One of the names in the journal was Emily, circled twice. Jesse called me that night, his voice shaking. "We found one of her boxes, remember?" he whispered. "We touched it. We put it back." I didn't sleep for 3 days. I think about that night a lot, about how close we were. About how easy it is to dismiss something strange as just eccentricity. About how we let ourselves believe that because someone is quiet or old or smiles in public, they couldn't possibly be hiding something evil. But the scariest part? We weren't the only ones who knew. Apparently, neighbors had seen him digging. Some assumed it was gardening. Others thought he was burying memories. No one called. The cops, because people like Mr. Calhoun don't look dangerous. They look ... forgettable, and that's what makes them monsters. I always thought my aunt married the most boring man on earth. Uncle Ray was quiet, punctual, and lived by routine. He ironed his jeans, labeled his spice rack alphabetically, and vacuumed every single day, even if the floor didn't look dirty. At family dinners, while everyone talked over each other, he would methodically clean the table between courses, wiping under plates while people still ate. My aunt used to laugh it off. Ray just doesn't like messes, especially human ones. I always thought that phrase was odd, but I never questioned it. When I stayed over at their house as a teenager, I noticed weird things. Like how every surface smelled faintly of bleach, even the doorknobs. Or how there were always at least 5 pairs of rubber gloves under the kitchen sink, unopened, neatly stacked. He had dozens of toothbrushes that weren't for teeth. They were labeled tile, grout, vents, sink drain. One night, I got up to use the bathroom and found him scrubbing the inside of the washing machine. It was 2 a.m. He looked up and said, "This is when the bacteria grows fastest." I thought he was eccentric, maybe a germaphobe, maybe even autistic, but never dangerous, until the night of the car accident. A drunk driver slammed into a tree a few blocks away. My aunt and I were watching TV when we heard the sirens. She stood to check it out, but Ray was already putting on his coat. "I'll go help," he said. No hesitation, no request. Just action. He came back 2 hours later, calm, no blood, no dirt. Just a little breathless. That night I couldn't sleep. I got up for water and noticed his boots by the door, caked in mud. Not from the driveway. From the woods. The next morning, the news reported the accident. The driver had survived, but there was something odd. Investigators said the scene was unusually clean, no blood trail, no broken glass scattered, no obvious sign of impact, except for the crumpled tree. They thought it was weird. I thought it was Ray. Over the next few years, more accidents happened in the area. People found dead in parks, rivers, ditches. Each scene described in similar terms: too tidy, disturbed after impact, missing evidence. I started to suspect. So I did something stupid. I followed him. Late one night, he left the house in a gray hoodie, duffel bag in hand. He got in his car and drove to a wooded area outside town. I parked far and followed on foot. Through binoculars, I watched as he pulled out gloves, a spray bottle, scrub brushes, and a black light. He walked around like he knew exactly what to do, like he had done it before. I left before he saw me. The next morning, a jogger found a dead body in that same forest. A teenage boy, stabbed, and the crime scene suspiciously clean, the report said. I never told anyone. But I started collecting things: photos, notes, GPS logs of his late-night drives, screenshots of crime scenes and timelines. I built a file. And then I gave it to the police. At first, they brushed it off. Said he had no criminal record, no motive. But one officer took it seriously, quietly, carefully. 2 months later, Ray was arrested, not for the murders yet, but for obstruction of justice, tampering with crime scenes. There was video footage, DNA on gloves, residue from industrial cleaners at multiple scenes. They think he'd been doing it for years, maybe decades. They still don't know why. He won't talk. My aunt is devastated. She still insists he was just trying to help, that he couldn't stand the sight of chaos, that he cleaned to cope. But they found blood in the filters of his vacuum. Blood that didn't match any known case. Yet. The truly disturbing part? We don't know how many killers he helped escape. By removing evidence, by wiping away fingerprints, by erasing stories from the very places they happened, he may not have killed. But he made sure the world couldn't catch the ones who did, and every time I see a spotless sidewalk or a polished stairwell where someone died, I wonder, was he here? Was this his work? Was this ... cleaned? Back in high school, we all had that one friend who was a little too into dark stuff for us. That was Kyle. He wasn't creepy in the horror movie kind of way. No trench coat, no knives in his backpack, nothing theatrical. Kyle was smart. Disarmingly normal. Played soccer, got good grades, even volunteered at the animal shelter. But he had this fascination with unsolved murders, cold cases, victims that vanished without a trace. Most of us chalked it up to curiosity. After all, crime podcasts were exploding back then, and everyone seemed to have a morbid hobby. But Kyle took it further. He'd show up with printed crime scene photos he said were from online forums, detailing how he thought the murders actually happened. He had theories, elaborate ones, about the true methods behind certain disappearances. There was one case in particular he always brought up. A girl named Rachel, 16 years old, went missing 2 towns over. Supposedly ran away from home, though her body was never found. Kyle would mention her a lot. Too much. He'd say things like, if someone wanted to get rid of Rachel, all they need is 5 minutes and a good river current. Or, you ever notice how her stepdad stopped giving interviews after the 2nd week? Suspicious. It was weird, but he delivered it like trivia. Like it was a puzzle and he was just the kid who solved it first. The strange thing, Rachel's case wasn't widely publicized. Barely a local blurb. Her parents didn't push for coverage. No news vans, no posters in our city. And yet Kyle knew. Her birthday, her favorite music, even the brand of her backpack. I asked him once how he knew all that. He just said, I read a lot. I let it go. We drifted apart after graduation.
He went to community college. I moved out of state.
Life happened. We followed each other on socials, but I barely thought of him until 3 years later, when I saw his face on the news. Not as a guest, Not as a commentator. As a suspect. They'd found a body in a dried-up riverbed after a drought. The remains were skeletal, but dental records confirmed it. Rachel. Clothes mostly intact, backpack nearby, and inside, a notebook. Torn pages. Scratched out names? One of the names? Kyle. The police arrested him within days. Not because of the notebook, that wasn't definitive, but because they searched his old laptop and found something chilling. Folders of documents labeled methods. Disposal, failures. Dozens of files tied to missing people. But Rachel's file was the most detailed. It contained timestamps, maps, a mock interrogation, transcript, written like a screenplay, where Kyle played both the victim and the killer. It was twisted, clinical, almost like a diary of intent. When asked, Kyle didn't deny writing any of it. In fact, he said something that still haunts me. I wanted to understand what they felt in their last moments. The silence. The choices. The surrender. I never thought they'd actually find her. They never proved he killed her. No DNA. No confession. But the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The folder. The notes. The unnatural knowledge he had years before anyone else. He was convicted of obstruction, evidence tampering, and disturbing a crime scene. Not murder, but they're still investigating. And deep down, everyone knows what happened. After his arrest, I went back through my old texts with him. Buried in a thread from senior year was a line I'd never paid attention to. Some people disappear so quietly, it's almost like they were never real. I used to think Kyle was just smart, curious, maybe a little off. Now I wonder how many other names were in those notebooks. How many other missing kids he studied. And whether Rachel was the only one who didn't stay hidden. There was a guy I used to work with named Darren. He wasn't the kind of person you'd instantly suspect of anything serious. A bit of a joker, a little too obsessed with true crime podcasts, but in an office full of dull, clock-punching drones. Darren made things interesting. He was the guy who'd show up with donuts on a Monday or prank the manager with a fake resignation letter. Always grinning. Always with some new weird fact. But looking back, his weird facts were always about one thing. Body disposal. It started off harmless. Ice breaks down tissue faster than people think. Or did you know pigs can eat a whole human in less than 8 hours? Morbid trivia. Stuff you'd hear on a Netflix documentary. At first we all laughed. Darren being Darren. He'd even say it himself. Come on, I'm just a fan of murder shows. Then came the joke. If I ever wanted to get rid of someone, he said one afternoon in the break room, chewing a granola bar, I'd use caustic soda. Light. Put the body in a steel drum, fill it up, seal it, and leave it in a crawl space. After a few months, gone. We laughed, uncomfortably, but he kept repeating it. Sometimes he'd add details like the temperature you'd need to keep it at, or how long bones take to soften. He even showed us a drawing once, just a scribble on a napkin, a diagram of a barrel, labeled with chemical ratios. When one of the new interns asked if he was serious, Darren winked and said, "Let's just say I wouldn't leave a mess behind." I wish we had reported it then. A few months later, Darren stopped showing up for work. No notice, no calls. The manager said he'd requested unpaid leave to take care of a family emergency. But there were rumors. Someone saw the police at his house. Another coworker said they heard he was a person of interest in a missing persons case. And then the news broke. They'd found a barrel in Darren's basement. A steel drum, half buried behind a false wall. Inside were the partially dissolved remains of a young woman. It wasn't just someone. It was someone we knew, Jenna. She'd been a temp in our department 6 months earlier. Quiet, sweet. She left after only 3 weeks, saying the job wasn't a good fit. No one thought twice about it. But the truth was, she never left the city. Darren had been dating her in secret.
Texts
showed they were seeing each other. Neighbors confirmed she'd been to his house multiple times. And security footage, grainy but clear, showed her entering his home one night. She never came out. The most chilling part? Inside the barrel they found not only her remains, but a laminated checklist. step by step, written like a guide.
Clean tools, mask scent, test light temperature, wear gloves.
Locked door. It was methodical, detached, almost scientific. When the police interrogated him, Darren didn't confess. He just smiled and said, "You laughed when I told you."
Everyone
Laughed. Guess I was too good at the research. That line still rings in my ears. The office went into shock. We had grief counselors. HR removed his desk and all of his files. But no one could forget. We all had memories of his jokes.
His fun facts.
His little grins and those offhand comments that now felt like red flags screaming in hindsight. I think about Jenna a lot. I wonder if she ever heard one of his jokes too. If she laughed nervously, the way we all did, not realizing the warning. Underneath, I wonder how many chances we had to take it seriously. How many moments we dismissed as just Darren.
sometimes just don't wear masks. They wear name tags.
They bring coffee to meetings. They send GIFs in the group chat. Sometimes. They tell you exactly what they're going to do, and you laugh. Her name was Lily. Beautiful, articulate, loved antique books and cooking shows. We met at a bookstore. I was browsing the horror section, and she asked if I'd ever read We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I hadn't. She smiled and said, "You'd like it. It's about secrets." That should have been my first clue. Lily moved quickly. After a month of dating, she wanted me over constantly. Her place was small but cozy. A charming Victorian-style home she said belonged to her grandmother. There were floral rugs, tall windows, and shelves full of dusty hardcovers. But what stood out most was the basement door. It had a chain lock and a bolt, and on the handle a red velvet ribbon tied in a bow. "What's down there?" I asked once. "Wine," she said casually. "But I keep it locked. Mold issues," I laughed. "Murder dungeon, huh?" She didn't laugh. She just blinked and said, "You'd be surprised how many basements hide things they shouldn't." Weeks passed. I never pushed the topic again, but little things bothered me. She didn't let me help carry groceries if they were for downstairs. She'd disappear for 20 minutes, returning slightly out of breath. Once I heard a thud, something heavy being dragged. She said it was an old chair falling over. I believed her until the night the ribbon was missing. I was alone in the living room. She'd gone out for ice cream. And for the first time, the basement door was slightly ajar. No ribbon. No lock. Just a black crack between wood and shadow. I stood in front of it for a long time. Then I went in. The basement was cold and smelled of earth and rust. There was no wine. Just stone walls and one exposed bulb hanging low. I saw dust, shelves with cleaning supplies, and something that looked like a gardening spade, though cleaner than I'd expect. But what made my skin crawl was the wall on the far end. It was new, not stone. Just thin, painted drywall. And in the center, faint scuff marks, as if it had been moved. I pressed it gently. It shifted. Behind it was a void. A narrow space, maybe 4 feet deep.
And in
that space was a suitcase, huge, worn, locked. I stared at it, heart pounding. Then I heard the door creak shut upstairs. I scrambled out, put the wall back, locked the door, and returned to the couch just as Lily walked in with 2 cones. Pistachio and coffee. She smiled like nothing was wrong. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I croaked. "Just cold." We sat in silence, eating ice cream. My hand trembled. I kept glancing toward the basement, imagining what could fit inside that suitcase. The next day, I called in sick to work, went to the library, looked up missing persons. There was a girl, Reedhead, my age, last seen a year earlier. Her name was Joanna, and her last known address was Lily Street. I didn't go back. I moved cities a week later, changed numbers, blocked her on everything. I didn't tell the police. I should have. I still think about that suitcase. About what I might have seen if I'd opened it. But some boxes are better left closed, especially when you already know what's inside. Everyone called him Mr. Harold, never just Harold. Always Mr., as if out of some reverence no one dared to question. He was the type of old man who wore wool cardigans in summer, always carried hard candies in his pocket, and smiled. With his whole face. At church, he sat in the same pew every Sunday, right aisle, second row. Sang hymns in a frail tenor voice, never late. Never loud. When my grandmother passed, Mr. Harold was the first to knock on the door. He brought pie. Peach, said it was his late wife's recipe. He didn't stay long, just offered prayers and a soft pat on my shoulder. But he came back. Every week. At first, it was comforting. Then it was routine. Then it was odd, because he wasn't just visiting us. He visited every widow in the church. Like clockwork. Monday, Mrs. Perkins. Wednesday, Miss Lyle. Friday, Grandma Beth. He kept a little notebook in his pocket. I saw him flip through it once. Pages full of names, dates, and strange symbols. Dots, circles, excess. One day I asked him, "What's that for?" He chuckled. "Just reminders. When you get old, memory gets funny." I should have looked closer. The first time someone went missing was subtle. Mrs. Ellis stopped attending service. People assumed she'd gone to live with her daughter. Then Miss Darla, quiet, nearly blind, stopped answering calls. Again, no panic.
The old disappear in slow, silent ways, but then it was.
Grandma Beth. She was sharp, strong, played cards every Sunday afternoon. One day she didn't show up. Her door was locked. Phone off the hook. And her dog, a yappy little terrier, was barking nonstop inside. The police were called. No forced entry. No signs of struggle. But her bedroom drawers were oddly neat, like they'd been emptied and repacked. And the only thing missing was a photo album. A week later, someone broke into Mr. Harold's shed. It was kids probably, teens being stupid. But what they found made one of them vomit. Inside, neatly stacked in boxes, were dozens of small, carefully labeled envelopes, each with a name. Each with items inside. A lock of hair, jewelry, buttons, even teeth. Yes, teeth. The police came. Searched the house. In the basement, beneath a trapdoor no one knew existed, they found more boxes. And more than just items. Bones, clothes, handwritten notes. In the far corner, sealed in a mason jar, was a strip of lace with Ellis sewn into the corner. Harold didn't resist. He was sitting in his chair, tea in hand. Said he was waiting. "They always find the truth eventually," he whispered. He'd been doing it for decades, starting in a different state. Changing names, moving every few years. Always targeting women no one checked on too closely. Lonely hearts, he called them. When asked why, he simply said, no one deserved to be alone. He died in prison 6 months later. Stroke. Quiet. Sometimes I still hear people at church say, "He was always so nice." They shake their heads. Say it could have been anyone, but I remember that smile. Too wide, too warm. Like a man who knew something you didn't, and I remember the candy in his pocket. Always the same flavor, peach. He was the type of kid who made everything into a puzzle. Birthday cards turned into riddles. Board games, especially detective ones, became competitions he always won. His name was Caleb, and he was my cousin. A few months older, infinitely smarter. At least that's how the family saw it. I used to admire him. He could walk into a room, glance around, and tell you what had been moved.
He'd say things like, "Uncle Peter had a cigarette today, even though he quit." Or Aunt
Lisa's necklace isn't real gold anymore. Everyone laughed. Said he should be a detective someday. He loved the game Clue. Always Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick. And he always guessed it before the second round. We thought he cheated. Once I even checked the cards. Under the board. He hadn't peeked. Then came the night he told me something I never forgot. We were watching one of those true crime shows. A woman found dead in her home. No signs of forced entry. The narrator was building suspense, asking how the killer got in. Caleb whispered, "Front window. She never locked it." You can tell by the dust pattern. The episode hadn't revealed that yet. I laughed. But 15 minutes later, the detective on the show said exactly that. I looked at Caleb. He didn't smile. He just said, "Obvious." He got older, stranger. Started keeping notebooks. Not diaries, catalogs, lists of cases, solved and unsolved. Newspaper clippings, printouts, even police sketches taped inside. Pages filled with handwritten timelines, motives, predictions. Why? Do you keep those? I once asked, in case someone ever asks for help, he said. One summer, we had a sleepover at his house. We were 16. He showed me a story he was writing. It wasn't fiction. It was an account, cold, clinical, of a woman's death. Step by step. From the time she came home to the exact angle of the blow that killed her. The detail was nauseating. It's from a real case? I asked, hoping for a yes. No.
He said, just an idea I had.
I didn't sleep well that night. A year later, a girl in our neighborhood went missing. No sign of struggle, just vanished. The police were baffled. It became a local obsession, flyers everywhere. Press conferences. At dinner, someone mentioned it. Caleb spoke up casually. She's probably in the woods behind Miller's Creek, shallow grave. She trusted someone. Everyone paused. His mom said, Caleb, that's not funny. He shrugged. Just a guess. The next day, I told my mom I didn't want to see Caleb anymore. 2 weeks later, they found her. Exactly where he said. At first, no one linked it to him. He hadn't known her. No connection. But a detective knocked on our door one evening, asking questions. Turned out Caleb had been interviewed before, in another town for a similar case. Nothing ever stuck. Until they found the notebook. It was hidden in a shoebox under his bed. This one was different from the others. It wasn't about public cases or famous murders, it was personal. Hand-drawn maps. Itemized checklists. Names, dates. His predictions were too exact, too early. And in one entry crossed out in red ink, Miller's Creek, July. He was arrested 2 days later. In the interrogation, he didn't cry, didn't argue. Just said, I thought no one would ever notice. I made it so easy to see. He's serving life now, multiple charges. They connected him to 3 disappearances, maybe more. They're still going through the rest of his notebooks. Sometimes I think back. To when we were kids, to how he always won the game. To how he always knew, and I wonder, how long had it really been a game to him? There are people you grow up with who never really leave your life. They just orbit, showing up at barbecues, weddings, funerals. For me, that person was Jonah. We weren't best friends, but we were always around each other. Same school, same block, same awkward teenage parties. The kind of guy you know well enough to trust, but not well enough to understand. Everyone had something to say about Jonah. Quiet, but polite. Smart, but intense. Keeps to himself, but means well. That last one was repeated. Often, like a defense, he always wore this olive green bomber jacket. Always, even in the summer heat. At beach bonfires, indoors at parties. Someone once joked that he must have had it sewn to his skin. He'd laugh and brush it off, say he got cold easily, or that it had sentimental value. No one pushed further. It was just Jonah being Jonah. When we hit our 20s, we saw less of each other, but once or twice a year we'd reconnect. A birthday here, a wedding there. Small talk, surface level. He always wore the jacket. Never changed his style. Never changed his expression. Calm, flat, unreadable. Then came the night he visited me unexpectedly. I had just moved into a new apartment. Jonah called out of the blue, said he was in the area, asked if I wanted to catch up. I said sure. He came over with a 6-pack, complimented the place, asked about work. Everything felt normal. We sat on the couch watching an old horror movie. The kind we used to mock as kids. At one point, he laughed, a weird, hollow laugh, and said, they always hide the knife in the most obvious place. I smiled. Like where? He pointed at the screen. Right under the couch cushion, or inside the vent, or taped to the back of the toilet. I laughed nervously. You've put some thought into this. He just stared at the screen. Everyone has thoughts. Some just don't say them out loud. After that, I offered him the guest room for the night. He declined, said he had to leave early, but he stayed for one more beer. When he left, he seemed distracted, like he'd forgotten something, and
His jacket was still on the back of my chair. At first. I didn't think much of it.
I picked it up to hang it by the door. It felt heavy, too heavy, not just from the beer. Out of instinct, I checked the pockets. Nothing unusual. Then I felt a seam that didn't belong. A stitched line inside the inner lining right where the padding was. Curious, I peeled it back. Inside was a folded plastic bag, taped shut. I didn't open it immediately. I just stared at it. Something about it felt wrong. When I finally opened it, I found photos. Dozens of them, printed on cheap paper. Each one of a person I didn't recognize. Different ages, genders, settings, some sleeping, some walking, some taken through windows. All unaware, and one thing in common, fear. In some, the subjects looked over their shoulders. In others, their faces were caught mid-expression, like they'd heard something behind them. Then I found the knife. It wasn't large, but it was sharp, well-maintained. No rust, no fingerprints. Just clean, cold, clinical. I put it all back and sat on the floor for a long time. My ears rang. My hands shook. I wanted to believe it was a joke. An art project. A performance piece. Then I remembered his comment during the movie. They always hide the knife in the most obvious place. I didn't call him. I called the police. They came, took the jacket, took my statement, asked questions. I answered them all. Then they asked, "Do you know if he's done anything like this before?" And suddenly it all rushed back. The girl who disappeared from our high school. The neighbor who moved after a break-in that left nothing stolen. The time, Jonah told me, completely out of nowhere. You'd be surprised how easy it is to follow someone home if you know their patterns. I hadn't thought about those moments in years. He was arrested 2 days later. Turns out, he was already a person of interest in multiple missing persons cases. They'd never had enough evidence, never had a witness, never had a reason to search. Until I gave them the jacket. Now he's behind bars. He never confessed, never denied anything either. Just said, "I should have double-checked." And when people ask me why I looked in the jacket, why I opened it, why I didn't just hang it up and forget, I tell them the truth. Sometimes your gut knows when the quietest person in the room has the darkest secret. He was the kind of boss you either respected or feared, sometimes both. Raymond Doyle, mid-50s, expensive watch, leather gloves, slicked back hair even when it rained. A voice like gravel and whiskey, and a smile that never touched his eyes. He managed our small real estate firm like a mob consigliere, tight ship. No excuses, loyalty above all. Most of us were too intimidated to get close. But every so often, during late hours or office parties, he'd loosen up. And that's when the real Raymond would slip through. He'd say things like, "People are assets until they're liabilities." Or, "The world would be better if it had fewer cowards and more silencers." We thought it was just edgelord humor, the kind of stuff older men say to feel powerful. We laughed, nervously. Then moved on. The line I'll never forget came on a Friday night after a client had screamed at him over a deal gone south. He poured himself a scotch, took a sip, and muttered, "Some people deserve to disappear." We all laughed. Like it was a joke, but something in his eyes said it WASN single quotes. Over the months, we started to notice things. A competitor who had just opened a flashy new office a block away suddenly went bankrupt after a fire. A property developer who sued Raymond's firm was found unconscious in his car, carbon monoxide poisoning labeled an accident. An intern who accused him of harassment simply vanished. No farewell email, no goodbye. Just gone. Each time, Raymond would shake his head, smirk, and say, "The universe has a way of fixing what the law can't." Still, no one dared ask questions. And I wish I could say I was brave enough to confront him, but I wasn't. I kept my head down. Until the day it got personal. A friend of mine, Julia, worked as a paralegal. She had handled some paperwork for Raymond's firm during a property dispute. Sharp, honest, stubborn, Julia never backed down from a fight. She once told me she didn't like Raymond's aura, that he had dark heat, whatever that meant. One day she called me shaken. She said she'd uncovered discrepancies in land documents, forged signatures, inflated values, bribed inspectors. All traced back to Raymond's name. She wanted to report it. She asked for my help. I hesitated. Then I said yes. 2 days later, she didn't show up to work, or answer her phone, or reply to text. Her apartment was undisturbed. Purse still there, keys still there. Laptop gone. Raymond acted shocked, said he'd barely interacted with her. Claimed she was probably just overwhelmed. Then he looked at me and said deadpan, she always seemed a bit fragile. That was the last straw. I called a contact I had in the DA's office. I gave them everything Julia had told me. Sent documents, screenshots, notes. Risked my job. My safety a month later. The story broke. Raymond Doyle had been arrested for soliciting a contract killing. Julia wasn't dead. Thank God. She was in hiding. The hitman he'd contacted turned out to be an undercover federal agent. They had recorded conversations, emails, money transfers. In one recording, he said, "She knows too much. You know what to do?" It wasn't just Julia. He'd tried this before, more than once. All connected to business rivals, legal threats, and anyone he considered a liability. The prosecutor said his calm demeanor was textbook sociopathic. Control. The kind of person who didn't kill with his hands but with influence. Who smiled while planning disappearances. When the news spread, the office collapsed. Clients vanished. Employees fled. No one could believe it, but deep down, none of us were truly surprised. Because we remembered the jokes. We remembered the way he said it. Like he meant it. Some people deserve to disappear. Now he's behind bars. No watch, no gloves. Just state-issued orange. I still think about how close we all were to laughing off murder. How easy it was to ignore the signs, because we didn't want to believe the man. Handing out paychecks could be handing out death sentences behind closed doors. Sometimes, the most dangerous people don't scream. They whisper, and sometimes, the most terrifying threat comes dressed in a suit, with a smile that never quite reaches his eyes.